Thank you, everybody, for your patience. Thank you for joining us today for our live web event, Optimizing E-commerce Shipping for B2B Customers. Our presentation today will be about 20 minutes. We'll reserve the last 10 minutes of the session or so for questions and answers. So if you do have any questions, please do submit them to the question box on the GoToWebinar panel. All lines are muted for the duration of the call so that we can say what we need to say, but we definitely want to hear from you. So please do use the question box and we will be sure to get to those. I am Adam Goldschmidt, the practice director here at Pixify. We are a NetAtWorks sister company, and I'm pleased today to be joined by our friend Jared Smith over at Shipper HQ. Jared, maybe you want to introduce yourself real quick so everybody gets your voice.
Hey everybody, excited to talk some B2B shipping.
Awesome. Just to give a little bit of an agenda for everybody so you know what to expect from this session today, we'll spend a very, very short period of time talking about Pixify. We assume that if you're here, you kind of know who we are already. Of course, we'd be more than glad to get into that offline with anyone. We'll then spend a lot of our time talking about who is Shipper HQ. We'll talk about where B2B e-commerce lives today and some of those unique challenges that B2B merchants are facing, what your customers are expecting in terms of optimized shipping, what that looks like, and how Shipper HQ can help solve for those challenges. We'll then sum that up into a bunch of takeaways and then get to your questions. So with that, I'll start by talking a little bit about Pixify before we kick things over to Jared. Pixify is an e-commerce agency. We are part of the NetAtWorks group of companies, a large IT and business consultancy out of New York. We have 12 business units, over 6,000 customers. We are a top Sage and NetSuite partner. Pixify is a top Adobe Commerce partner, and together we've put together our solution called ERP Commerce. ERP Commerce is an e-commerce solution that allows companies to launch fully transactional and ERP integrated websites, both for B2B and B2C, in 60 days or less. We're leveraging market-leading technology partners in Adobe Commerce and Boomi, who are year over year ranked among the leaders in the Gartner Magic Quadrant and Forrester Waves for technology. And by using these platforms, we're enabling companies not only to go live fast and address their immediate needs, but providing them with the platform and tools that they need to scale and grow their business for whatever the future holds. In that sense, we consider this a forever platform. And just out of the box, some of the integrations that ERP Commerce facilitates are getting all of your product data, your pricing on those products for your B2B customers and your available inventory synced over to your e-commerce storefront, your customers, the source of truth being the ERP for your B2B customers, and then obviously having your order details flow back and forth with your ERP so that customers place orders on the e-commerce website, they go into your ERP for fulfillment. And if you have a B2B system where customers are placing orders directly in the ERP, syncing those back over to the e-commerce site so they have full visibility into their order history. And then obviously the invoices and shipping that gets associated to those orders in your ERP gets synced over. But enough about me. Jared, talk to us a little bit about who Shipper HQ is.
Absolutely. I appreciate the handover. So Shipper HQ, so we are the #1 shipping rate optimization platform in the e-commerce space. And what that means in practice is that we, as a shipping solution, are found in the cart and checkout of an e-commerce merchant's website. So we are going to be controlling the shipping options that are presented in any given scenario. We control how rates are calculated and really specialize in complex rate calculation scenarios to ensure that merchants can show a fair price to their customers and also keep their margins whole. But we also optimize that checkout experience with respect to shipping to ensure a frictionless, highly converting checkout experience. As a company, we have over 100 years of combined shipping experience. Our original founder, still current CEO today, Karen Baker, she launched the company in 2008. We're coming up on nearly 15 years of solving shipping problems for merchants. And we are integrated with all of the leading shipping and carrier providers, some of the big wigs like UPS, FedEx, and DHL, but also some really unique shipping solutions that can give you a competitive edge and better catering to your customer base. And we're also integrated with all of the leading e-commerce platforms. So certainly for this audience, we're talking Adobe Commerce, Salesforce Commerce Cloud, BigCommerce, but then also some other B2C platforms like WooCommerce and Shopify as well.
Excellent.
Flip to the
Excellent.
next.
And again, as we take the conversation into B2B, I think when you look at that, the second to last bullet there about the amount of carriers, obviously on the B2C side, the usual suspects, UPS, FedEx, USPS, DHL are extremely relevant, but obviously in the B2B workflow, we definitely do need to start looking at some other types of providers. So that's good to know.
Naturally, freight included as well. And just a quick kind of snapshot overview of what Shipper HQ does. I talked about, we're managing that checkout experience. And when I look at the kind of value that Shipper HQ can provide to a merchant, and especially a B2B merchant where there's a lot of inherent complexity, then the real value of our solution is both in the breadth and the depth of our functionality. When I talk about breadth, I mean that we can handle so many different shipping scenarios and use cases, from rating out of multiple warehouses to doing both parcel and freight, to considering cartonization and dimensional packing, to enabling and automating rules and compliance. There's just so many different scenarios that Shipper HQ can handle all in one platform. It really does become your one place to manage your entire shipping experience. And in each of these things, we handle that kind of area of functionality to a very high degree of sophistication. So we can handle anything from the simplest to the most complex shipping scenarios across all these different use cases. And that's, kind of to Adam's point, is what makes Shipper HQ your forever shipping platform.
Awesome. So we're specifically focused today on B2B. So I think it's important to talk a little bit about why that is important and why we're focused on that today, and just some stats, for our audience, that in case you didn't know, the tide is obviously turning towards the digital channel on B2B. We've got $1.7 trillion in B2B e-commerce sales took place in 2021, and that's expected to surpass 4.6 trillion by 2025. 65% of B2B companies are now transactional online. So that means even if you aren't today, your competitors likely are. 18% of B2B revenue is coming via e-commerce, and that's going to only increase. Obviously, some of the big box stores that transact through EDI and things like that are going to always take a big chunk. But that percentage, we do expect that to continue to climb over the years. 39% of B2B buyers prefer to purchase online. That means almost 40% of the people that you're talking to would rather not be talking to you. They'd rather be on your website buying your items. 90% of B2B buyers would go to a competitor if the supplier's digital channel does not meet their needs. Apologies for the typo there. We mean meet with the two E's there, but we'll fix that on the public one. And then 53% of B2B companies are going to switch suppliers in 2021. That's compared to 18% in 2020. So what that's telling us is that as companies struggle to meet the needs of their B2B buyers online, they are going to go someplace else. So it's really, really important that we spend some time focusing on some of the unique challenges that B2B merchants are facing, specifically as it relates to shipping.
Yeah, and I can definitely speak to that in a little further detail. And just to give some context of what Adam was saying in the previous slide too, clearly there's a huge opportunity in B2B e-commerce, but there's also a tremendous amount of risk if you can't get it right. And I think that's often why a lot of B2B companies have been hesitant, or have felt like they couldn't really transition online, because there's so much complexity in shipping and fulfillment that it makes that checkout experience really difficult to kind of replicate in an automated fashion. Some of the reasons for this: multiple distribution centers, right? So B2B companies often have multiple origin points from which they're shipping. And then there's a lot of considerations even that goes into that further. Do you have real-time insight into where inventory lives, so you know where you can actually ship from? But also, what is your fulfillment strategy with respect to multi-origin? Are you, just picking wherever the closest origin is, ship from there on a per product basis? Are you doing consolidation, right? You need to be thinking about how you're doing that so you can ship most efficiently. There's also just the reality that there's probably bigger shipments that you're doing, right? It could be pallets, it could be, a single shipment with multiple boxes. And so as the shipments get bigger, they get harder to quote, and the risk in quoting it wrong grows bigger and bigger as well. And so you need to make sure you get it right when you're quoting. And there's also a lot of specially negotiated agreements with your customers. Do they get special pricing? Are they getting special promotions? Or maybe they can't qualify for special promotions. Do you have agreements where you're going to offer them unique shipping options? Maybe you offer will call for some, but not others. Maybe you allow some people to pay on their account, but not others, right? So you need to really tailor that experience online in an automated fashion, right? So you take all these things that you know, right? All your sales reps probably know, exactly what the deal is with their clients, but how do you automate that? And then lastly, one of the biggest risks that people face, and honestly concerns too, is about omni-channel, right? If you're going to go online, if somebody goes to my website, are they going to get the same quote as if they call their local sales rep, right? If not, then it's going to set one of those two sales channels up for failure. So you need to ensure that you have parity across all the different channels so that you don't lose customer trust, right? And that's really important, of course. Now, if you want to jump to the next slide, Adam.
Sorry, I hit my mute button for a second. I did actually want to jump back in and also point out the scenario where, especially in B2B, you do come across situations where you might have multiple orders fulfilled with a single shipment, or a single order that needs to be shipped to multiple locations as well. That adds a lot of that complexity.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
So we talk about optimized shipping. What do we mean by that?
Yeah, absolutely. So the funny thing is optimized shipping is kind of boring shipping. An optimized checkout is something that people don't even think about. And that's the ideal scenario, right? You want to give them exactly what they want and expect to see and nothing more, so that there's no reason, there's no friction that prevents them from checking out. As soon as you start throwing too many options at somebody, they get decision fatigue, they get confused, and that's what leads to abandoned carts. And so the very simplest thing that you can do is make sure that you don't have any redundant options in there, right? It might be because you ship with both UPS and FedEx. Well, they're very analogous. And so maybe you want to choose one or the other, or anonymize it and choose who you want to ship on the back end. You might have, if you're showing transit times, you might have next day, 2 day, 3 day, ground, but in some cases, ground gets there in the next day or in 2 days. And so you want to curate the options that you're presenting to your customers, because you do want to give them choice. You want to give them exactly as many choices as they need to check out easily, which is a very loaded statement. But if you can nail that, it makes for a really great checkout experience. And you want everything done quickly, accurately, dynamically, right? You don't want to have to submit an order, contact for quote, then get them a quote later. Or you don't want to have your customer submit an order and you have to get back in touch with them and say, we didn't charge a residential fee, or we didn't charge, there was an issue with compliance, or hey, this thing can't actually ship air, it needs to go ground, it's got, hazmat items into it. So you need all of that to happen automatically, so that as soon as they click purchase, it just goes out the door, right? You want that to be done quickly, and you want to make sure that it doesn't hurt your margins in the process either. So you need that accuracy in that automation.
And that's a really good point, because I know some B2B merchants specifically who, when they take their orders, because of the complexity involved in setting up those shipments for those customers, they actually don't charge the shipping up front. They actually bill the shipping later. And again, for most customers, that's going to be a jarring experience. They'd like to see the totality of their order and what it's going to cost them up front. So providing that automation and that speed delivers a tremendous value. And like you said, it's boring, and boring is good in the sense.
Yeah.
So talk to me a little bit about, so we've seen the problems. We know that customers need optimized shipping. We know what customers are looking for. How does Shipper HQ specifically solve those challenges?
Yeah, absolutely. So, a lot of the functionality that I talked about several slides back, and then the problems that B2B merchants especially face, that is our bread and butter. So we have, for example, the ability to define different distribution centers, or as we call them, origins within Shipper HQ, and an algorithm that automatically selects based on your strategy. Do you want to fulfill from the nearest warehouse on a per shipment basis? Do you want to try to consolidate, maybe reduce the number of total shipments? You set up your strategy, you set up your warehousing and identify where products sit, and then just let Shipper HQ make the decision making from there, and then feed that into your ERP, feed that back through, Pixify, their systems, in order to ensure that you have all the necessary information in order to properly fulfill based on Shipper HQ's decision making. As Adam mentioned, we connect to a ton of different carriers, and that's parcel, it's freight, it's some really unique shipping options that customers are increasingly taking advantage of. Same day, which is a little bit less relevant in the B2B space, but alternate pickup locations, will call, those kinds of things. You want all of that managed in one place so that it's one cohesive experience and makes sense based on whatever they have in the cart. And you can define within Shipper HQ conditional logic, sort of if-then statements. And that is key in order to automate, any sort of like rules, logic, pricing strategy that you have that you want to do over and above just the rates themselves, but also compliance, right? If a customer adds a hazardous item to the cart, then you automatically want to hide air shipping methods. You want to automatically hide international. You want to charge that hazardous surcharge. You want all of that to just be totally seamless. So when they click then add in their ship to address, they just get a quote and they say, great, that fits in my budget, I'm good to go. They don't need to know that behind the scenes, there's dozens of rules and all this dynamic logic that's going into it, plus your own markup and pricing strategy that builds a little bit of margin so you can make shipping a profit center. All they see is a price, they check out, they're happy. And really, honestly, some of these unique shipping options can give you a real competitive advantage. Adam mentioned in a previous slide that 65% of B2B merchants are transactional in e-commerce, but over half of them, as surveyed by B2B buyers, are not doing a great job. 52% of buyers are frustrated with their B2B merchants' online experience. So while there's competitive pressure to get online, a lot of people aren't nailing it. And if you can nail it, if you can do something that's more unique, that's more automated, that's faster, easier, then that gives you a huge competitive advantage as the dollars continue to shift from offline to online and B2B in general just continues to grow.
I made a comment before somewhat facetiously about, you're spending a lot of time talking to your customers and they don't want to be talking to you. That probably was not the right thing to say. I was trying to be cute and funny, but the truth of the matter is that your customers definitely do want to be speaking to you about the right things. They want to make sure that the conversations they're having are impactful conversations, and you want to make sure that your salespeople are having those impactful conversations, not talking about, where is my order and how much is this going to cost. So we are trying to provide that self-service so that the relationship that you have with your customer remains in place and is supported by the web. And to that point, things like warehouse pickup, will call, and those types of things are also going to provide opportunities. It may be easier for your customer to get the merchandise from your location as opposed to you shipping it that way. And we certainly want a solution that can support that. So that's good to know. We're going to be wrapping things up in just a couple of seconds here. So I do have a couple questions in the queue. We'll get to those shortly. But if anybody has any other questions to submit, now would be the time so that we get them in. But this is really, really a great overview, Jared. So let's just wrap things up here and get some of those takeaways. And of course, in the questions, we can get into some of these topics a little deeper if we need to. But if you were to leave this webinar knowing anything and paying attention to one slide, it's this. It's that now more than ever, B2B customers prefer purchasing from suppliers with mature digital offerings. And they want simple, fast, accurate information on the shipping methods and rates that those merchants are offering them. B2B companies typically have greater complexity related to shipping, related to inventory and logistical factors, the larger order volumes, the customer-specific negotiations, and all of those elements that Jared was so keen to point out to us. And it's important to note that Shipper HQ helps solve for this complexity. It gives merchants the competitive advantage by optimizing the entire shipping process from DC selection, rate calculation, pricing strategy. You're giving your customers the experience they desire. You're getting cost savings with that. You're gaining efficiencies. So in the end, everyone's gaining from this process of providing your customers with this optimized shipping experience. With that, I wanted to thank you, Jared, first off, and then thank everybody here for paying attention to us for the last 20 minutes or so. We finished it. We do have a third question that has just come in. So hopefully we'll have time to get to more if there's any more that come in, but let's start. The first question comes from Ralph. And Ralph asks, does Shipper HQ support billing the shipping to customer accounts? My guess is what he means is, and I've seen this in certain B2B workflows for myself personally, if I'm ordering something for the organization, I have the ability to enter in my carrier information and bill it to my USPS account or my UPS account or my FedEx account instead of being billed through the company if I have better rates. Is that something that Shipper HQ supports?
Yes, so we have a feature that we call a customer account carrier, which what it does is it collects the customer information at the time of purchase. They're not going to get a quote at that given moment because, for security purposes, we want to make sure that we're gathering and validating that information. But yes, you can dynamically determine if the customer checking out is someone who is appropriate and qualifies for this kind of service. And then if so, gathers their account information so that you can then bill on that account and fulfill accordingly. So yes.
Very good. Ralph, hope that answered your question. The next question comes from Rachel. I currently run eCommerce Advanced. She wrote SCA, but I assume she means eCommerce Advanced. That's a NetSuite solution. Does Shipper HQ have an integration with SCA?
So we don't have an out-of-the-box integration with SCA, but we do have an API, and we've had folks who have integrated this before, so it's definitely possible. People have built from a variety of platforms to our API as well. So, if you're interested, it's definitely possible, and we can talk more about logistics on how we can get you working on that.
Yeah, and the eCommerce thing is interesting because we do come across eCommerce. Obviously it's run by Oracle. It's connected into NetSuite. And when we talk to customers about ERP commerce, and we have a couple of customers who used to be on eCommerce or have been considering eCommerce, this is indicative of the type of challenge you might have where, going with one of those versus one of the, the leading solutions like a Magento or a Shopify, a WooCommerce, a Big, that have those pre-built integrations. So when it comes to Shipper HQ or when it comes to other modules that you may potentially need to integrate with, you're generally speaking going to have to develop those using the APIs instead of downloading an extension. So in the case of Shipper HQ, or where you have those seamless integrations, you end up spending your dollars on revenue generating activities instead of building things that are already built for those other platforms. So if you are on eCommerce, I would imagine this is one of several challenges you're seeing. And if you have any desire to talk about those more, please reach out. Apologies if there's a loud gush of noise. My gardener decided to show up as we're wrapping this webinar up. That's funny. We have one more question here, so let's get to that. Talk to me about dimensional shipping. So I guess that's not really a question, that's more of a statement. I know what this means. So thank you, Isaac, for submitting that. Dimensional is when we charge shipping, shipping rates can generally be based on the size of the package. It can be based on the size of, the weights of the items and things like that. I do know that there's a concept called dimensional shipping where not only factoring into the equation as to what box is going out in and what the shipping rate should be, it would be what box an order gets packed in based on what else is in that order. So if you have, 3/4 square inch boxes going to a single customer, you might pack that in an 8 square foot box or something, 8 square inch box rather, I'm sorry, I'm using very, very large sizes. But maybe Jared, you could explain that a little bit more for our crowd here in terms of what that means and how Shipper HQ supports that.
Yep, absolutely. So in a general sense, what Shipper HQ does is it's going to look at the dimensions that you've already defined on your products in, say, Adobe. And within our platform, you can define all of the different boxes, and I kind of use air quotes for boxes, that you ship in or on. These could be, very small, like letters, envelopes, bubble mailers, actual boxes, cartons, skids, full trucks, whatever you ship in or on, you can define those dimensions within Shipper HQ. And then we have an algorithm, to Adam's point, that is going to match up whatever's in the cart with whichever box or boxes can most efficiently contain those items and then get rates accordingly. However, there's a lot of nuance that you can also inject into this if need be, and that's quite relevant in the B2B space, is that you might have certain items that need to pack in a certain way. Maybe they're already boxed up and ready to go, they don't repack with anything else. Or maybe at certain quantities, rather than just kind of throwing items into a box with other things, you've already got a full master case, right? And so you say, right, at 24 and under, you're going to pack this with other things, but at intervals of 25, you would then have multiple case packs of this item. And Shipper HQ, you can define that logic, associate those proper case packs, and ensure that how your warehouse operates is how Shipper HQ packs, because that's integral for getting accurately calculated shipping quotes. It's the #1 most popular feature of Shipper HQ because it is a thing that affects everyone, from the simplest B2C retailer to the most complex B2B business. You have to know what things are packing in, or how many skids or pallets or whatever, in order to get accurate rates. And that's the foundation for a shipping strategy, is accurate rates. Then you can figure out what your margins are to discount, or how much you're trying to make over and above shipping, right? And go from there. You need to start with that stable foundation of accurately calculated rates, and dimensional packing is key to that.
Awesome. Thank you for that. You did a much better job explaining it than I would have had.
I talk about it a little bit.
A little bit, right? A little bit. If we want to talk about, integrations and the different touch points and those types of things, I'm your guy. But when we get into dimensional requirements and things like that, that's a Jared question. I think that's it for the questions. So we did finish a couple minutes early, so that's all right. But I did want to thank everyone again for attending, anyone who's still with us. I am Adam. My Contact information is on the screen. So if you have any questions about what we talked about today, e-commerce as a whole, please don't hesitate to reach out. We'll be sure to include Shipper HQ and Jared's information in the follow-up recording that's sent out as well. But again, Jared, thank you for the time in not only today on the session, but in preparing and being a great partner in general. So thank you, everyone, and we look forward to seeing you again.
Yeah, thanks, Adam. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate the time.
Bye, everybody.